Hello there everyone, it's Nina Marie. Thanks for joining me today for another video. Today I'm going to be showcasing a couple of cards that I've created with Simon Says Stamps May 2025 card kit, which is so beautiful. It's called Beautiful and Curious, fittingly named. And inside of this kit are some really fantastic products that work so well together to create different types of cards. And I'm going to be creating something a little bit more on the collage, mixed media side, but they work great for everyday cards. So I have not only the pattern papers in the kit, but also the Beautiful and Curious stamp set. That is what you're seeing right here. There are coordinating dies available for this stamp set, and Simon Says Stamp has some coordinating products as well that are available too. But also in this kit are fantastic, beautiful papers from the Tim Holtz Wallflower collection. Now you're going to get an assortment of pattern papers. These are the sheets that I received, and I love that these double-sided sheets are so beautifully matched with the stamp set, and it's going to create really beautiful cards together. So I'm going to use this floral image from one of the sheets of pattern paper, and I've die cut it with a panel die, and I'm going to use a glue stick to apply some adhesive around the very edges of my panel. I'm doing this in a very sketchy-like manner. The reason being is it's going to give me a bit of adhesive that will start to become tacky, and when it is, I can take some of the deco foil sheets that's included in the kit and apply that over top of my wet adhesive. So now this adhesive that has a little bit of a tacky finish to it because it's not fully dry, it's going to pick up the foil and transfer it onto my pattern paper. So that's going to give me this really pretty foiled edge, and it looks distressed, which is what I was going for. That's why I kind of applied the glue in a haphazard manner. It really brings out that distressed feel. And if you want to, after applying your first round of foil, you can always come back in and fill in any spots with a little bit more, just to get the effect that you're going for. My background panel is beautiful as is, but we could always add a little bit more distressing and layering. So I'm going to bring in some of the smaller images from the stamp set and the mini archival ink pad that you also get as part of the kit. And I'm going to stamp some of those smaller images over top of my pattern paper to continue that beautiful collage feel. Things like the little cancellation marks. We've got some fun text images that have a really great worn effect. They're feathered out, which looks great when you stamp this on top of your paper. And that archival ink will dry nicely on this paper. The paper does have a little bit of a coating to it, so it does take a little bit longer to dry, but you could always set this with your heat tool. Now I'm going to go ahead and take some Distress stain. This is the tarnished brass color, and I'm going to use a paintbrush to pick up some of that ink and splatter it onto my background. I love splattering, especially for projects like this that have more of a collage mixed media effect. And I did bring in some white paint as well to apply a little bit of splattering there too, which is giving some nice contrast. There are some beautiful images in the stamp set, and I'm picking out the butterfly. It's quite large, so it's going to be a nice focal point on my project. And I thought that the coloring for the butterfly would be beautiful as the pattern paper. I have this blue and white paper sheet that I thought would be the perfect color in between the stamped areas. Now I am going to stamp this with VersaFine Clear ink because this is a pigment ink and it does stay wet a little bit longer. I want to be able to emboss some clear embossing powder over top of my butterfly. So that's why I chose that ink for the stamping. But alternatively, you could always stamp it with the black archival ink too. I am going to heat set this with my heat tool. I like to heat the back side of the paper first before bringing it to the front. It just helps minimize the warping of my paper. And then because I want to give this butterfly some shape, I'm actually going to fold the wings at the body. So that way when I go to adhere this to my project, the butterfly body will actually be glued directly onto the card, and then I'll use some foam tape to pop up the wings. It'll make it look lifelike and dimensional on this paper. Now inside the kit, you do get a length of May Arts twine, and I actually already had the twine in my collection, so I actually pulled out a really long length of it so I could wrap it around my card to give that really nice tied bow down along the bottom. So you won't get quite this much twine in your kit to be able to do this exact effect, but it is a great twine to have on hand. I have it and I love using it for so many different projects, so it would be something to pick up if you really like the style of this twine. I am popping up the panel that I've created here onto an ivory card base, which I made with cardstock from the kit, and that's going to mat that beautiful panel nicely. But I do need to add a sentiment, and I'm going to emboss this onto some red cardstock. This will really pop on that beautiful yellow background. There is some touches of red in the background, so I thought this would be a really nice color to accent my florals. So I'm going to stamp this twice onto some cardstock with embossing ink because it's a very delicate sentiment. I wanted to make sure that I stamped very lightly so that I don't create any heavy lines with my stamping. Now I am using cream embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp to emboss this greeting because I want to have something a little bit softer than white, so the cream adds that nice warm touch which goes well with the ivory cardstock. So this is getting popped up onto the bottom portion of my card over with that twine, and you can see how that accents those red flowers in the paper beautifully. So here I'm going to take some foam squares and put those on either side of the butterfly body. And then that flat area where we folded the wings, I'm going to go ahead and put some liquid glue there so that way I can adhere this directly onto my card project. So that butterfly body is adhered straight to the card, and I'm making sure to press that down really well to give the glue a chance to bond. And then I'll just go ahead and press the wings down as well. But as you can see, they pop up beautifully because they have that foam tape behind them. So it gives the butterfly a really beautiful lifelike feel. It feels like it's flying off of the paper. There is a really pretty A2 metallic khaki envelope in the kit, which goes really nicely with the colors of this kit. And also because I used the foil, I really liked how that shimmer paired nicely, so I can use that to mail this card. So as you can see, mixing the stamps and the papers together created such a beautiful layered effect on this card. And then adding a little accent with that foil, really it brings out a vintage shine. Now I love the papers so much, I wanted to use them again. So I pulled out this sheet here, which features these beautiful birds. And I wanted to use the Distress Crayons to color in my paper. This is a fun technique. So you're gonna get 4 different colors of Distress Crayons in your kit. These are the 4 colors I received in mine. And I'm going to apply them onto my paper and then use my finger to burnish them out just to get them a really nice smooth finish, feather them into the rest of the paper. And it's really easy to do. So I'm just using my finger to help me move this medium around. It does blend out pretty easily. This paper, like I said, does have a little bit of a coating to it, so that does help the crayon move a little bit easier. But I'm just using those 4 colors to be able to apply to different sections of my image and then feather them out. I'm letting them blend into each other too, which is creating some nice in-between colors. And then I'm just gonna apply them in small amounts here and there until I'm happy with the result. I like to start off with just a little bit and then continue to add as needed so that I don't overwhelm my paper with too much all at once. Then that way I can control the amount of feathering I have and how much color I'm putting down. So this really transformed the paper. It really added a nice pop of color and really contrasts nicely with the birds. All right, so now I'm going to add a bit of splattering to this as well. This time I'm using Distress Mica stains. I've picked out this really nice, pretty decayed brown. I love this because it has a slight gold finish to it when it dries, but it's a little bit more muted, not as intense as the gold that I used earlier. Then I also wanted to add some blue because there was a lot of blue in the birds, and I thought that would be a nice complementing color layered on top of my images. So I splattered that as well, and then finally I'm going to use white paint once more and just splatter that on top. I am being a little bit lighter handed with this so that way I don't overwhelm the paper with too much of that white splattering because I don't want that to distract from my images. Now I'm pulling out this Star Lattice embossing folder that I had in my collection from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm using the steel cardstock that's part of the kit to create a card panel and also a card base. So this is going to give me a beautiful backdrop for my birds. I want this Star Lattice to have a little bit of contrast, however, so I'm going to use the Distress Crayon in blue that I have received to add some contrast to the raised areas of the embossing folder. So very lightly, I'm going to trace over this design and then just burnish it out a little bit with my finger just to soften it just a bit. What this is doing is making those raised areas stand out a little bit more, and that's creating the perfect amount of contrast for my background. It's like a tone-on-tone effect, which I really like. So it's not going to distract from the beautiful birds on my card panel, but it will make this background feel a little bit more interesting. And then the same way that I did the first card, I want to add a little bit of that foiling to this as well. This copper foil that you get in the kit, you get 8 sheets, is a really fun accent to add to your backgrounds. Now you could also use that foil to emboss the sentiment strip sheet that you get in the kit as well. I did not use those sentiment sheets in either of my cards today. However, they were great single line greetings that you could use for a lot of different styles of cards. Same as I did for my first card, I wanted to layer up some of the stamped images that are in the Beautiful and Curious stamp set to overlap with some of my images on my pattern paper. This is just adding more of that fun collaging and mixed media effect. And because I had already attached this panel onto my card by the time I thought of doing that, I am being very careful with how I'm stamping this, but it's also aiding into that distressed stamping because I'm not going to be able to get a perfect impression because I have foam tape behind my panel. So I really was happy with how that turned out, even though I thought of it last minute. I am going to emboss another greeting, this time onto some burnt orange cardstock, and I'm using the same cream embossing powder. This sentiment here says, "You make my heart smile," which I think is a really sweet greeting. And I'll just use my heat tool to set this and then cut the sentiment out. And then I'm going to finish off the card with a few Dazzling Gems from Simon Says Stamp. These Dazzling Gems are the gold color, and they are a perfect soft gold that is fantastic for a vintage feel. I thought that matched really nicely with the colors of my splattering, my background, and then of course the foiling too. The last thing I decided to add was a bit more of that May Arts twine. Like I said, I'm using my existing roll that I already had in my stash. So this is going to wrap around the front panel here. I had a little bit of room off to the side where I had not added any adhesive. So I was able to slip that twine around the end here to give a nice little bow, which goes nicely with the design. Adds that nice warm touch with the fibers. This card also would go beautifully with the metallic khaki envelope, as you can see here. I'm just loving how those Distress crayons layered up on these pattern papers. What's also fun about these papers is that they do themselves feature a lot of collaging, and so you can enhance that by adding your stamping and then your mixed media mediums such as the Distress crayons in the background. It creates a really unique effect. So between these two cards, we have quite a bit of fun techniques going on here, and they created some really cool layered looks. I hope that you were inspired by the ideas that I've shared today and that you'll try out some of these techniques with the contents that you receive in your kit. If you would like to see even more inspiration using the card kit, I also encourage you to go over to the Simon Says Stamp blog and check out the card kit galleries, because that is a great place for not only you to see even more inspiration from other people who have made stuff with the kit, but don't forget that you can add your own inspiration there too. If you make something with the card kit, you can upload your image there as well, so we can all be inspired by each other. Any of the products that I used today are linked below in the video description if you are looking for any of those. But in the meantime, I hope that you enjoyed watching this video and you got something out of it. I thank you so much for stopping by and spending time with me today. I'll look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. So until then, friends, have a fabulous day and thanks for watching.